Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well and staying safe. I just wanted to give a quick intro to the firm. I'm an attorney at McCarter English. We are a 175-year-old full-service law firm with approximately 450 attorneys and 9 offices, 9 the global practice. We have all of the practice groups you would have in a large law firm, including corporate, tax, IP, litigation, labor, you name it. We represent VC funds and startups. We represent over 1,500 startups in the tech and life sciences fields, including consumer-focused companies. Basically, we help companies form. We issue their initial equity, protect their IP, help them develop IP strategies, help them finance, raise money through angel and VC financing, including other private rounds of funding. And we help the companies grow and exit through M&A and IPO. In PitchBook, we are generally ranked in the top 3 to 8 firms regionally and the top 6 to 10 firms nationally and globally. And that's in angel and VC deals. Last year, we closed 242 plus financings and M&A deals with over 6 billion in revenue. We also have a large IP group. We have 120 plus IP lawyers who are specialists in those technical fields, including the tech and life sciences fields. They handle patent, trademark, copyright prosecution, licensing, and litigation. And included in this group, we have 100 litigators ready to sue and defend all over the U.S. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I believe Brian or Faye has my information. So thank you.
Thank you, Mara. Again, my sound is still strange, so I think I'm going to log out and log back in. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Thank you.
For those that joined, thanks so much for hopping on. I have a feeling this number will probably, fluctuate throughout the call. But this event and this week's program is VentureOut's first Future of Work event. It's one that a lot of people on the team, especially Faye and I, are very passionate about the space. I'm like a huge productivity and tool geek. Even though we're a team of, we basically use as many tools as a team that is 10 times larger than ours because of that fact. And so being able to, work with Sam to scour the globe for companies innovating in the space, and work with Faye to identify thought leaders like many of the ones that we have coming to speak today in the space has been really exciting. And I'm psyched to hear from the 3 speakers that we have. I'll give a quick introduction to VentureOut, and then we're going to invite in our first speaker. So VentureOut, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a company that I started in 2012 with a mission of bridging the gap between innovators all around the world and opportunities available to them here in New York City. Traditionally, sort of pre-COVID world, we did that by mostly running programs in New York City and flying hundreds of founders every single year to come into New York, learn about best practices and how to scale their business across sales and marketing, how to expand into new markets, whether that's coming from Boise into New York City or coming from Dusseldorf, Germany. And those programs that we run in New York are between a few days, sort of our 1-week programs, which are an introduction to the ecosystem, meeting 25 thought leaders like some of the ones that you're going to hear from today, and really starting to penetrate the market here in New York City, whether that's a part of our Future of Work program and meeting a bunch of corporates and investors in that space, or it's our FinTech program or our AI program. We also run 3-month US launch accelerators for foreign startups to help them set up their initial footprint, gain initial traction, and start their journey of American success. And one of the things that in this midst of crisis, obviously bringing people from around the world and around the country into New York City isn't exactly the best idea today. And so we've done a pivot towards virtual programming. This is our second program. We ran a health program a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to have a whole series of events that we're going to be pushing out. all of that is going to be basically free programming that we're putting together, trying to showcase the best of our network to the community here and around the world. And one of the exciting things about doing this is that we no longer have only a captive audience in New York. We are able to actually access audience all around the world, which is part of the reason why we do events like this, which are most typically evening events we do in the morning. So we get access to everyone, basically very far east of us, like all of Europe. And then the other thing that we're doing now is it's a lot harder for us to build and run programs like we used to that can add value and impact, and to have that be sort of a part of our business model. And so we've pivoted towards really focusing on our one-to-one work, which we do mostly in our 3-month accelerator, where we're working really closely with each founder that's in that program, as opposed to our cohort programs, where it's much more of a program for a group of companies. And we've really been expanding that into really what is our core competencies, the areas that we've always been helping companies in, which are enterprise sales, channel partnerships, lead generation. It's fundraising strategy, lead list development, getting introduced to investors. It's digital marketing and content. It's actual verbal pitch, but also working with companies on their pitch deck. And what am I missing? Sales, marketing, fundraising. And then we have US expansion, which is working with partners we have like Mara and McCarter English. We also have CSG's, is another law firm we work with focused on helping our companies with immigration, and a few others. So anyway, if you're interested in working with VentureOut, we'll be pushing out some information about that once this event is over. But you all aren't here to hear me bloviate about our company or sort of how it is that we're handling crisis. You're here to listen to 3 thought leaders in the future of workspace that we're really excited to have come and chat and share their insights and answer our questions. For anyone that's on the webinar, feel free to ask questions, put them into the chat. Myself and a few other members of the VentureOut team are monitoring that, and we'll be teeing those questions up. And I think we should probably bring in Charles now. I'll introduce maybe quickly for those that have come in the last few. Faye is our director of programs, Faye Louise. She is the much prettier face at VentureOut that is going to be showcasing to the group here. And so she's going to be emceeing the event today. She spent the time talking to Charles, an old friend of ours and a partner of ours, who is running our Future of Work event. Who is our first speaker, who's going to speak about the landscape of the future of workspace globally. The background on our relationship with Charles is that he's a partner that has been helping us run programs for French startups, specifically from the Brittany region, which I'm sure he'll tell you a bit about. And one of the first companies that he brought through us is this amazing French company called Klaxoon, which is focused on collaboration software and remote work, and he's become very researched in the space as a result of that, and that's why we wanted to have him come and join. And he actually is also one of the more senior executives on the team at Klaxoon. So he ended up having them come through our program to help them with US expansion, and then they needed a whole lot more help, and he was the best person to do it. So now he's actually been a senior member of the team for a long time now, working on that mission with them. And some very cool things that they have going on. So, Faye, I know you spent way more time talking to Charles and to the other speakers than I will, so I'll hand it off to you to introduce Charles. Charles, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Hello.
Hey, Charles.
How's it going?
That was a great introduction from Brian. So I don't need to say too much more, and I know you're going to take us right into all of that. All of those amazing things that you have in your brain of yours that we shared the other day, which was very enlightening for me about the future of work. So let's just make sure that you can share your screen, and that's all okay there. And then I'll jump right off and hand it over to you. Perfect. I'm here if you need me.
It is working.
So isn't it nice when things just work? Okay, cool.
Great.
Thank you so much, Charles.
Yeah, thank you. I think, has VentureOut really picked the perfect time to talk about the future of work? I think, yes.
I think so. I think we nailed it on time. Everyone's wondering about future of work, and is it here yet? Are we on our way there? How are we adapting?
Yeah, we're definitely here. I think
especially virtual collaboration. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
remote work, that's not timely right now at all.
Or
Not at all.
relevant. I mean, who's working remotely?
Yeah, so I think VentureOut has picked a great time to get a program around the future of work and get thought leaders to talk about it, but also get startups in the ecosystem worldwide to start thinking about it, because never have organizations thought about the future of work or how work in general is done as much as the last couple of weeks. So Charles Kergaravat from Klaxoon, I'm the head of international marketing there. I've been there 4 years, and we're at the forefront of technologies, smart work technologies for the workplace. I have 15 years of experience before that in a very corporate world, so I've traded my very corporate hat for swag that's more startup-y. What I want to do here for everyone, because we can't be here forever, is to give a little bit of a landscape of what we're seeing, what's happening, how the future of work is changing for people, what we were doing before that we might have to change. But before that, I just want to get everybody connected on this session to make it just a little more interactive, because webinars sometimes aren't. So if you just grab your phone, and this will take 30 seconds, you can either point your camera to the QR code on the screen, or you can go on to app.klaxoon.com, and there's a lovely QR code there. As everybody's muted, I'm not going to say, hey, if you have trouble, say something, because that's not going to happen. I would say maybe I can copy this and put it into the webinar chat, if I can find the lovely chat here in this.
Charles, we'll do that. We'll add the link and the code.
I'm in.
Terrific. Okay.
It was really quick and easy for everyone who's not sure. You just scan your code.
Great.
But we will put that down.
So,
okay.
Can't start without talking about Klaxoon, because we're talking a lot about these companies that many organizations have never heard of. We've been around for 5 years now. Started out in France, but now we have 2 offices in the US, in New York and Boston. We have millions of users in 120 countries. We work with 15% of the Fortune 500. 100% of the CAC 40. So that's companies like L'Oreal, Nestle, Airbus, BNP, GE, a lot of amazing organizations that have never been so much in need of putting a digital transformation in place. We are 240 employees now. Brian mentioned that Klaxoon took part in a VentureOut program in 2016, and we've come a long way since then, doing 2 rounds of funding of 55 million in all. And I do a lot of research with companies, but also university professors around this, and a lot of studies, and it's pretty fascinating how we work. So when we talk about the future of work, we have to talk about 3 things. We have to talk about people, and probably our most important asset, even though we'll talk about AI and things like that, machine learning, people are at the root of success of any organization, and we have to take care of that. Places, I think places has taken a whole new meaning now. We had a few months ago co-working places being put in doubt. Now the physical office is being put in doubt, and we're transforming how we work because we're working from home. And the technologies, we've had this experience here with a webinar and a GoToMeeting, and we're going to hear about Salesforce and Zoom later, and I'll tell you more about Klaxoon. And what's important is, and what I think everybody's asking, at the same time their kids are knocking on the door of their home office, is what is coming up next, and what should be our focus when all of this sort of the dust settles. So I've tried to list a few things of where we're going that will be super key for us to be successful, and the organizations that get it right will be the ones that are doing the best in the future. So first off, communication, and this shift from a very sync to an async type of way of doing things. And when I say sync to async, I mean, and I think many people can relate, is that we have always on culture. We are permanently getting notifications on our phone about something, about needing something or seeing something and needing an answer right away. And what we'll need to get right is to be able to shift to a very async type of way of doing things. Synchronizing our teams, aligning our teams very efficiently, maybe at the beginning of our day with a morning meeting, and then letting people go off and be creative and do deep work on their projects, be productive, and then come back later and realign. And if we stay in a world where we're getting a billion Slack notifications and we're doing a whole bunch of Zoom meetings, we'll just be another rat race. And we need to be able to take a step back and use tools like Klaxoon that lets us work asynchronously and very effectively and very efficiently. Focus teams will beat distracted ones. And that kind of leads into the past one where, again, our teams really need to be working on projects and have the ability to take time to be innovative, to be creative on them. And if they're being bugged all the time, and at the office, that might be the open space where someone comes to see you every 3 seconds or sends you a notification every 3 seconds, to where people do have that, hey, take a step back, work on my own work and develop it and build it. Remote work will be a competitive advantage. I think many people are discovering remote work, but it'll be a competitive advantage in many ways. I think about talents. There are people everywhere that are hurting right now and that have to change jobs and do things of that nature. But as an organization, you'll never be able to find, if you put into place remote work policies, you'll never be able to find so many different talents. In the past, we looked in a general radius that was close to our home office or our corporate office for talents. Now, the book's open for a talent anywhere to join your organization. Global collaboration will increase like never before. I think what we're noticing that as we've moved to work from home, we've noticed that we can work with people that we don't normally work with. We might be in a corporate setting where there are global offices and time differences. And as we work and we move to async collaboration, as we move to working on projects as a team at a distance, we have the ability to pull in a lot more people that we didn't before and include them in that project management process, include them in a project that you're working on. So that's super important, and it works if there's a certain amount of transparency. Our leadership, our teams need to document, need to share, need to show information, make sure that teams know what they're supposed to be doing, what other people aren't doing, how that fits into what the corporation, what the organization is doing and its mission, and then letting people go and do their thing. So those will be important things going forward. And the question is, to understand where we're going, we have to know where we came from, right? So how are people really working now, and what's going to change? So I won't share all of my research, but some things that are really pretty wild when you ask people how they do what they do on a daily basis, and you ask a very simple thing about sharing information, which is something that, you know, for an organization to work, well, you better have smooth information sharing. What we notice is number one way people share information, ladies and gentlemen, is in person. Well, that's going to be a problem if I'm working from home because I'm never going to see you again. And we can look all the way to the right on this graph, from productivity apps to video conferencing to communication apps. That's not used before this crisis enough. So we will see a big shift from in-person sharing to the tools that we will be using much more now, I hope, to allow us to be able to work in ways that we can be efficient from anywhere. And that leads to meetings, because we're still doing some, and I've heard a lot of people tell me that they're doing more meetings than they ever before. And the question is, what are we doing really in our team meetings, in our organization meetings? And generally what we're seeing is, number one thing that we do in those times are to share information. And it sounds like if we use technology the right way, we'll be able to share information in a very visual, collaborative way with some of these productivity tools like Klaxoon. We're able to get people in sync quickly, and it'll leave us time to do something that's super important now that we're all working remotely. And that's all the way on the bottom of the list, 24%, build relationships. We'll never have to really rethink this as much as now, and saying, hey, I'm not going to see you at the water cooler. I won't have a coffee with you at the coffee machine or see you in the hallway. How are we building relationships? And also, how are we giving feedback on a daily basis? If all our time is spent sharing information, we have to rethink that. And that's one of the big things about the future of work, is to really rethink process and rethink rituals and add human elements into all of that. Team and teamwork will never be as important as it is in the future, and people are asking for that. And we can see that when teams work together, they're more creative, and 82% of the time they are, so it's hard to deny that. Want to talk about remote work because clearly it's something that everyone has been faced with. I think a lot of researchers and analysts are saying that we made a jump of about 5 to 7 years in 4 weeks. And that's something that's a challenge. And we look at what the challenge was before. And one of the big things people were telling us was that they just weren't informed when they weren't in the corporate office, when they were working from home. 63% of the time, people felt that they weren't informed. And that's a problem, because if that's what your teams are telling you, well, you're probably going to not do very well because people are sort of lost. And when we ask who are the ones that are least informed of all, we notice that it's management, that all of a sudden can't see what you're doing. They don't know how long your lunch break was. They can't tell what time you left the office that day. And that leaves maybe a time for us to rethink how management is done as well, how managers can become potentially mentors instead of micromanagers. So I've added a quick list of things that the new normal might be like if we are much more working remotely or working in a very hybrid flex type of mode. I think it's super important to rethink our process and our rituals, as we said before. If you're trying to duplicate what you were doing before and putting it into now working from home or working flexibly, that's not going to work. We need to make working from home visual, use tools like Klaxoon to have the ability to visually follow projects, visually synchronize and align your teams. We have to bring our human to work, as I was saying before, building relationships, giving feedback, make that time where you can create a certain synergy with your team. Trust. Managers or directors need to trust that their employees are going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to do it right. And that's where async work is the future. Fear of missing out. I think we're all stuck at home, so we can't miss a party or something. But also one of the things that happens is, and I talked about doing too many meetings, is sometimes it's okay to miss meetings. Just saying, hey, I'll miss this one, but I know I won't totally miss out because information will be shared in such a way that makes process and makes meetings more efficient. So I won't be missing out on something, and I don't really need to be there. Me time versus we time. One of the things that happens is we need to be able to cut things off and say, hey, I need me time to work on my projects. I don't need to be pulled into something. And I think when we talk about process and we talk about organizations will have to think about giving employees more time for themselves, obviously to do things that they care about, which is their family and their well-being, but also on projects and on work projects, and letting them have time to reflect and be innovative. Feedback, super important. That's something that the younger generation is asking for feedback on almost on a weekly basis. And in the past, organizations were saying, hey, I'll give you feedback on that yearly review. We'll have to think about that, and we'll have to create feedback loops because we're not seeing each other at the coffee machine anymore. So technology can help with that. And we have to create scale for all the things that we've done. And that's where the tools and a tool like Klaxoon and Klaxoon's templates allow organizations to scale remote working, scale efficient working, and scale teamwork for everyone in an organization. We have to talk about the future of work. We cannot not talk about millenniums, because in a few years, they're the ones that are going to be running the show. 75% of the global workforce will be millenniums coming up, and they will be deciding what the future looks like. And one of the things that they ask for is that they want purpose. And I think with everything that's happening and the anxiety that confinement and this crisis has brought, I think there will be organizations will have to be purpose-driven like never before. I mentioned feedback before, but you can see the numbers are kind of scary currently with our current process. Only 17% strongly agree that they receive meaningful feedback at work. That needs to change. Our managers need to be mentors and not time management wardens. And people want to learn stuff, and they want to learn stuff every day. And when you only see that 39% of millennials agree that they learned something that's linked to their jobs in the last 30 days, well, it'll be key to change that going forward. So lifelong learning at work will be super important. I have a little bit of time maybe, and in a couple of minutes, I just want to talk about collective intelligence, and that's something that will become more and more key as we go forward. We talked about the most important resource of our organization will be our people, and how do we get the best out of them? And there are 3 factors, and studies show that what we need to do to have collective intelligence that works, the ability of collectives of individuals to solve problems well, is number 1, letting everyone have an equal say, which is nice to say, but harder to put into practice. So that's either having tools that are anonymous, like this is today, and letting people send their information, their ideas, their opinions without repercussion. Super important as well is empathy. Bringing your human to work is important, and bringing empathy and thinking about how others work together is going to be important. So our soft skills will be something that will definitely be a requirement in the future for any job that we'll be in. And number 3, diversity. It is proven that groups and collectives that have more women and more diverse ideas are more innovative and more productive. So that doesn't sound very hard, so let's get to it. I've added a question section. So for those that are connected, if you look at your phones, you can send questions there. Maybe if you can figure out the GoToWebinar, you can send them in the section there as well. It was a pleasure to chat with you and share this information. I am very happy to continue the conversation on LinkedIn, so please shoot me a message if that's possible. And I don't know if we have time for questions or if there are questions in the GoToWebinar. If not here, send them here too. Thank you so much, and thank you to the team, Brian and Faye and everybody else for having me.
Charles, thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you. We do have quite a few questions.
Awesome.
So I can just ask them out for you. We've got one from Daphne. Oh no, that was something else. Okay, we have some comments. Okay, there are more comments, unfortunately, not the questions for you.
Okay. So there was
just about the functionality and technicals of the webinar. Sorry?
Yeah, there was a question about how Klaxoon was impacted with the crisis. I mean, we've been impacted like everybody else. We're a team of 245 people that went full remote in a couple of days, and that's going to be a challenge for everyone. But I'm super impressed with everyone, how we were up to the challenge in going full remote, working as a team, adding daily points on a daily basis, each team doing synchronization meetings on a daily basis, top management taking this opportunity to really communicate clearly what we were doing with town halls and multiple town halls, explaining what we were doing and what was happening and what was impacting our clients and ourselves, but also adding elements of fun in all of that. And for us also, it was super important to help our clients and prospects in general to get through this time, because it's definitely challenging. So we launched a 3-month program offering a 3-month free trial for anyone who would like to test the solution, but we just weren't giving the keys to the car. We were also teaching you how to drive. So we offered 3 months of guidance and assistance for anyone with our expert team to help them through this full remote crisis. There are more questions popping up here. I don't know how much time I have. Faye, Brian, you let me know.
Yeah, we've got a few minutes. We're going to jump into the next panel at 9:45. So we still have a few more questions we can go through.
Yeah, so a good question here on product promoting remote work, online collaboration. Is your company also working remotely on a daily basis? Well, you know, I've been working remotely about 80% for like 4 years, and I really have to say that without Klaxoon, I would not have been able to do it. It is my affinity for remote work and the flexibility that brings only works if I can stay connected to my team. So traditionally, we were a hybrid organization. Some people worked remotely more than others. Now we're a full remote organization. And I think the ability to do that has been about, number one, a tool like Klaxoon, but also a culture that has a collaborative mindset. You can't just have the tools if you don't want to have a collaborative mindset. So I think that has to be part of what you think about. Culture and tools are super important. Do more time for a question or no?
Yep, we've got a couple more questions.
Great.
Anyone who's listening in, you can ask questions in Klaxoon, which you can see now is what's happening on the screen. They're in the Klaxoon application, or you can ask them over, should be over the side of your screen, a little in the webinar control panel. There's a question section. You can type them directly in there.
Faye, do you have other questions for me? Because I've answered all the questions I have in Klaxoon.
I'm just saying if anyone else wanted to add any questions in.
Oh, here we go. According to how remote work will impact team chemistry, and that's an interesting one. I think it's really a case-by-case basis. I think you cannot be a good team player if you don't have well-being for yourself, right? And one of the benefits of remote work is flexibility. You have more time for your family, more time to do things that you want to do, more time to maybe meditate or to work out. Those things are important, and the ability to have a feeling better about yourself allows you to do teamwork better. And here, this is live, so we have this is what working from home is. Interruptions.
Where's the cat?
And that's what it's about too. So I think the mix of chemistry in your team and being able to work efficiently at home is super important. So that's having a place dedicated for your work, and not everyone can have that, but that's super important to doing it right. Having set hours where you can do what you need to do with your team to align with them, but also having time where you can work on things that are your projects and be creative and think about strategy, and then having that extra time, to be with your family or to work out or to do things that you're passionate about. I think if you do all those things, remote work works really well.
Great, thank you so much, Charles. I completely agree with you there. Okay, so I hope that you were able to join us in the next session we're going to jump into now with Salesforce and Zoom. Hey, Brian.
Hello. Charles, thanks so much for that. That was really great.
Thank you, everybody. Well, shoot me a message on LinkedIn if you want to continue the conversation with me. And guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Charles. I'll talk to you very soon. Hey, Alan, Gregory, how are you, gentlemen? Oh, do we have sound on? Let me make sure. Alan, I'm just going to unmute you.
Sure thing.
Hey, Gregory, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Greg or Gregory? How do you like to be
Please,
addressed?
Greg.
Greg, cool. Alan, are you okay with Alan?
Am I unmuted now on your side?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
There we go. Well, good morning or afternoon, everyone. Yes, that was excellent. I think it's going to be a hard act to follow. Charles had a lot of great advice and points, and I think we'll probably be reiterating a lot of what he had to say this morning. So
absolutely.
It was a good start.
It was a perfect segue into, this is, I guess, more of an extension of that, but it is nice to paint the landscape of all of the aspects within future of work. So great, thank you both for joining us. I'm just going to do a quick short introduction, and then I'm going to hand it over for you both to do your introductions, because you'll do a much better job that I will. So this morning thank you everyone for joining us here for the panel. We're going to be talking about the future of work and virtual collaboration. This is the VentureOut Future of Work conference. As Brian mentioned earlier, for anyone that didn't join us right as we started, this topic is something that we have been really excited about running for a long time, and we've been talking to different partners in the industry and just figuring out how we're going to put something like this together. With the coronavirus and the COVID lockdowns, there was no better time to run a panel and a program around the future of work than right now. Firstly, because it's really interesting and everyone is just trying to understand a little bit more about what this means now for the landscape and of the future of work, but also for us to learn as well as an organization about the best ways that we can pivot and navigate in these interesting times. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with the both of you. So Gregory and Greg, sorry, and Alan both work with organizations that are at the forefront of technology that enables the transition into the future of work. So we have Zoom and Salesforce that they're here with. Thank you, Brian, for pulling that up. It just surprised me when I saw that came through. Okay, so we're not going to be talking about their organizations today, but they are representing their organizations and are miles ahead of a lot of us when it comes to working with organizations that are constantly evolving into the way of the future of work. So Greg, maybe let's start with you. Would love to have just a quick intro from you.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Greg Daniels. I'm a program manager at Zoom. I joined Zoom about a year before we went public. So my day one was readying technology and security to operate to the standards of a public company and then scale. And it's been a wild ride. It continues to be a wild ride. When I joined, we were just over 1,000 employees. We're over about 3,000 today and growing. I have to say, coronavirus, it definitely disrupted my day-to-day. I think everyone's day-to-day, but I'm a 100% remote employee, so there wasn't too much of an adjustment other than that I haven't been out of my apartment for probably 33 days now and counting.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's sort of virtual collaboration and remote work is one thing, and then having to do it inside of your apartment and not leave, that's kind of another thing.
Need a little bit of a walk in the park right now.
Yeah. Are you joining us from New York, or where are you calling in from?
I'm in New York. So I'm based in New York. I tend to be back and forth between New York and San Jose on a regular basis during a more normal time. But I'm 100% remote from New York, yes.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Alan, where are you dialing in from today?
I am dialing in from just outside of Toronto, Ontario. So same coast as New York, up a little across the border. And so hopefully the Canadian ones and zeros are working okay on this call today.
They are, surprisingly. Yeah. And again, I love your background. It's very, it does look like you're in the landscapes of Canada, that's for sure.
Thank you. And so yeah, so I'll introduce myself, but first I'd just like to begin by saying, you know, our best wishes to all of you that are out there today watching that are impacted in any way, financially, physically, emotionally, by what's going on. You, your friends, your families, your colleagues. You know, truly, you know, our hearts go out to you. Some of us are handling it, you know, better than others, differently than others, and I think together is truly the only way we're going to get through this. So thank you to companies like Zoom. Faye, thank you to you for like helping educate people, and Charles who gave a lot of great information earlier. You know, my background, I've been working in the collaboration space for 25 some odd years through a variety of collaboration tools. My focus has always been on helping people be more productive and helping teams collaborate better. And so, you know, one of the points that was brought up earlier is how this has just accelerated things. I do find, you know, the current crisis as a catalyst to helping a larger group of people understand what those of us that have been doing this for a long time really take for granted, has been an opportunity as opposed to just a negative or a challenge. I think we have to look at, you know, how this is going to help people moving forward. We have tough times to get through till we get there, but I think we're all going to come through better when we're done with this.
Yeah, brilliant. I completely agree. Very interesting times. Thank you both. Thank you, Alan. So I'm going to jump right into it. I'd like everyone to know that you can put in questions over on the side of the control panel box. There's a little question tab. So we will be coming to questions at the end for around the last 15 minutes or so. So please, any questions that you have for Alan, Gregory, or just in general, please pop them into the questions box.
Yeah, and I'll pop in here for just 1 second because I promised Greg I would say this. Hey, Alan, how are you? Great to meet you. And thanks for saying that. I really appreciate the sentiment. I think the one thing that I didn't want to let go unsaid is the fact that we have Zoom communications currently on a GoToWebinar. And so first wanted to say apologies for that. We are big Zoom users here at VentureOut. Everyone on the team has a license, but you know, you guys have been a little bombarded, I think, with people that have been using it, and we've had a tough time upgrading to the webinar. So what I was assured by Greg at the mic check when we did this a little bit earlier today is that he's going to help us finally get on board. So excuse the awkwardness of having someone from Zoom coming in through GoToWebinar. We'll have that solved very quickly, we promise.
It
No
wasn't
worries.
awkward until you said it.
We'll get you taken care of.
I think it's a
Everyone
great
wants to-
example of that today's environment is tool agnostic. We're all just trying to help each other however we can.
Very true.
Just people helping people.
Yes.
Greg,
Thank you,
I will
Brian.
tell you very, very quickly, if you want that like jump the shark moment, you know, my 80-year-old Jewish grandmother told me she had a Zoom meeting for her synagogue book club. She actually used the word Zoom as an adjective. So
I
it
love
was
that. That's amazing.
Yes, I feel like a lot of people are just saying, hey, let's jump on a Zoom call. There is no like cell phone anymore
You've
or
become a
email
verb.
really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, I mean, when we do consider the nature of the future of work, it is quite a broad concept. And I feel that there are a lot of people that have their own definitions of what that means, depending on the organization that they work for, the role that they're in. So I would love to hear from both of you what this definition or what the future of work, or even more specifically, what virtual collaboration means to both of you. So is that live streaming conferences? Is that augmented reality, remote work and being physically separated from your team? I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on that so that we can really understand your definitions. Alan, if you wanted to take us through.
Sure. I'll jump in. I think let's start with the definition before we get into the virtual, with the definition of collaboration. Obviously, we all kind of adhere to the adage that collaboration is a group of people working together on a common goal. That common goal could be a project, it could be brainstorming, it could be launching an event, it could be designing a product, whatever it happens to be. It could be medical, financial, legal, whatever industry people are working in. It's, you know, as opposed to individual productivity, collaboration is clearly about coordinating and communicating and people getting work done. So how is that changing now? Why are we using the term virtual collaboration? I think maybe something more like distance collaboration, because what has changed is the amount of people that are physically in the same space, whether it's an office, whether it's a boardroom, a conference room, a brainstorming lab, a physical power plant, wherever people are working. The biggest change right now is that people aren't together. Greg's locked up in New York. You know, we have everybody at home. So regardless of the tools, whether it's live streamed, whether it's a webinar like this video, whether we've got, you know, Oculus Rift glasses on and we're physically seeing each other in our rooms, the change that has happened is that we're just not physically together. And the challenge is, how do we get past the nuances that being live with someone actually brings? How do we look at things like body language and facial expressions and, you know, terms that are used and things like that? So to me, virtual collaboration is all about changing the patterns and the styles of just the way we work together. A lot of them, and I'll pause in a sec, Greg, and let you jump in. You know, what I want to make sure we get through today is that a lot of them are not just filling in and replacing things and we're going to struggle through them. There's a lot of things that are better. There's a lot of things we can accomplish and do in these virtual environments that we couldn't in the physical. And I want to make sure we touch on that today.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely will come to that around something that's been really interesting for me is hearing a few other perspectives around the space, that what this time that we're in is a lot of organizations and leaders are either reactive or proactive, and they're looking at what does the future of work and collaboration in teams and organizations mean after this, and what kind of ways are they approaching that. So yeah, maybe we'll jump right into that straight after. So Gregory, when it comes to future of work and virtual collaboration, what are some definitions for you?
Sure. For me, I think it's the ability to work, and I think this builds actually very nicely on what Alan shared. It's the ability to work how you want, where you want, and to some extent or another, when you want. It just grants a tremendous amount of freedom. That to me is really the future of work, the future of collaboration. I will say it's as much of a people and a culture change as it is a technology change. You really can't have one without the other, because if you have a strongly hierarchical culture where people need permission to collaborate, collaborative tools aren't necessarily going to help that culture change or move to the next step, move to what the future of work is. So you really can't have one without the other. And then to build on Alan's point, the ability to work with these new tools and to have a culture change, a change in the way that we work every day, meaning we're collaborating more, we're focused around outcomes as opposed to overcoming hindering processes. The ability to do that really accelerates what an organization is able to do.
Yeah, great, thank you. So just on that point then, I mean, like I shared just a moment ago, how do you both see organizations using the experience that we're going through now, and how they will either come out of it, or that once the markets and countries sort of return back to normal-ish state, what are some ways, either from the organizations that you work at, or just your own perspectives around the way that leaders can adjust to changing their organizations to enable more of the virtual components if we do go into another crisis like this, that maybe they're a little bit more prepared for it?
Yeah, I think the number one learning that people are taking away from this is that one size doesn't fit all. I think I've seen so many articles or webinars or things that give these prescriptive 10 steps of surviving through, the crisis type of thing, where true leaders are looking at this and understanding that the people that they are responsible for, the people that work for them, or their customers, or their prospects, or the community at large that they're trying to help, are all coming at this from their own points of view, and that you have to have empathy for the way people are working. We all love to say that it's great to jump on these video calls and see our colleagues, and in many ways, some of us are embracing how wonderful it is to get together with our teams. While at the same time, some people are suffering from, the feeling of being overwhelmed and having to perform on camera, or having to show their colleagues what they're doing. So I think perhaps the biggest lesson is to listen, more so than to advise. I think setting a framework for how people can work, coming up with new tools, adjusting processes for flexibility and what hours people work. And there's a lot of standard things that, of course, we'll go through today that, yes, everybody should follow. But I think true leadership comes from understanding that no one size fits all.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. And Gregory, I mean, your experience of how leaders are shifting and adjusting, whether you've seen yourself or things that you or even any recommendations that you could give.
Yeah, and I would actually echo everything Alan said. I don't know if I can add very much to that. I think it really is a matter of taking.
We have to disagree on something today.
Observing how your employees are adjusting to this new world, be it a temporary one or a permanent one, and then giving time to find that groove, however they're going to work, however they need to work. I think I've noticed that for people who are individual contributors, people who take time throughout their working day to quietly produce, writers, editors, people who need that space, this can be a bit of an adjustment, because suddenly you're getting video calls, you're expected to be on camera, and really you want some time to actually step back and produce. So it does take some time. I think great leaders, good leaders, they observe that, and they give time to settle into that adjustment.
Yeah, great point. I know for us at VentureOut, our head of content, Anna, she does go into her own little world in the office where she has her headphones on and she's editing, and she has that time and that space to really just focus and concentrate. And she has shared with me that changing the way that she operates, that she works, by having to join meetings virtually, has changed the way that she goes into those little focus moments. So yeah, I mean, everyone's experiencing in a different way.
I think Charles said something earlier in his session that I really want to reiterate, was the idea that we don't want to just digitally recreate everything you were previously doing in your office. So if you had, set 11 a.m. meeting on Tuesdays, blah, 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 the new way may not necessarily just be, okay, have that exact same meeting at that exact same time, but do it via a web conferencing tool or a group collaboration tool. I think reevaluating the way that teams were working together and asking the questions of why was that meeting there in the first place? Was it because it was great we could have everybody physically together at the office? Or now that we're not, can it move to asynchronous work instead of synchronous work? And so, a lot of people are suffering from a heavy addition of meetings to their calendar as opposed to a reduction of meetings on their calendar. And there isn't, again, necessarily a right or a wrong. I think some of these new meetings, these more fun sort of team get-togethers or happy hours or things are incredibly helpful in bringing teams together that now are sort of missing the camaraderie of being in the office. Figuring out the time that we're saving because we're not in transit anymore. One of the things I said early on when this crisis began was, don't take your 1 hour commute and dedicate it to your inbox. Take that 1 hour commute and dedicate it to a walk or your children or whatever it happens to be. So again, it comes down to that idea of figuring out the balance of what fits for your lifestyle that I think is still the area. We're only a month or so into this. It's still things people are trying to figure out. We're not going to have the answer quickly.
It is all very brand new. And another point I really do want to reiterate is that because there's been a lot of information on the internet, on webinars about this rapid change into the working remotely, collaborating virtually, and the future of work is here now. Whereas we are in an interesting time. It's not like people are being forced into this situation. It's not as if organizations and people have been able to slowly adapt and evolve into the way that they work and then just do it remotely. The pace has really been accelerated. So, and I think that there are both positives and negatives around that. But Gregory, as somebody that's worked remotely for a long time, I would love to hear how you either started working remotely and if it was a shift or if it always came natural to you, and any recommendations you could give to people who are trying to adapt to this new form of remote working.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually went through this transition when I first joined Zoom because I was coming from a culture where you had to be there in person. You couldn't not be in the office. And so going to Zoom, it was a completely different experience. It was night and day because suddenly I was 100% remote. I was responsible for my own time every day and figuring out how I need to structure my day and my week, my month to be effective. There's always going to be a transition period when you go from, I would say, the in-person world of work to a hybrid situation or a fully remote situation. I think it's important to be deliberate. And I think, Alan, actually, you touched upon this in your last comment, which was don't take that morning commute where you would be checking your inbox and continue checking your inbox, take a walk, do something you like to do. So I've had to be very deliberate in order to produce. And so basically, I create very structured hours throughout the day where I will and won't take meetings. And if someone books over, I will politely push to the next day if possible. I make sure to carve out time for myself in the middle of the day so I don't continue to work without just taking a little bit of a break. And I think that has been, it's a very, I think, small change with a big impact. That has been, I think, for me, what has made working remotely successful is I'm able to structure my day very deliberately. I think if you don't, it's easy for those meetings to build up in your calendar because you get excited, you want to do the work, you're always saying yes, and then suddenly you're staring down, a 12, 13, 14-hour day, but you did it to yourself. So I think the key is to be very mindful about how you're controlling your time.
Yeah, I love that point. Being deliberate around carving out time for strategy meetings or for time for yourself or time to just disconnect from technology. Right. I think is so important right now because, as you mentioned, people are just trying to go from the in-office experience to the remote, whereas maybe that's not the best idea. And having those time blocks, I think, is a really great idea.
Yeah, and I'll see it on my colleagues' calendars too. I'll see coding time, 2 hours. No one's booking over coding time right now.
Yeah.
and things like that are important.
Looking at industries that are not necessarily in the knowledge worker sort of type of industry, they are the ones that are even more overwhelmed by this sudden surge of 1 hour time blocks. The doctors, the lawyers, the teachers, the scientists, people that we're sort of recreating our office space, but via virtual tools. Those of us that spend our time in front of the computer anyway. The bigger change right now is happening to the millions of employees from small businesses to the world's largest organizations that weren't just recreating their office environment, but virtually, but now have an entirely different style and agenda. And, for example, I know people who are doctors that are saying, well, I never used to have, 3 1-hour meetings a day, but now we're having, our agenda specifically has, this meeting to discuss this topic or this procedure or this, response and things like that. And so a lot of people are finding work to be very different than it was just a month ago. And we, again, really have to have empathy and help them through that.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that is not new is robotic process automation and technology.
Hey, Faye, can I interrupt? Sorry. I want to get to RPA. I actually really do. We had a question that I think is a really good follow-up to the conversation just now. So if I can just insert it, it's from Daphne LaForest. Thank you, Daphne, by the way, for being our best question asker so far. So what she was saying is that a lot of people have a misconception that you can successfully work remotely just by having the right tools, but that if you really actually want to scale that across an organization, it's as much cultural as it is technology. And I think that what you all have just been talking about, especially you, Gregory, around sort of like what the schedule is that works, like making changes like that, especially to like the cadence of your day, are things that also need to be accepted organizationally. And so I was wondering if you two could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank
Is
you.
it clear what the
Greg, you lead the way, I'll follow.
Happy to start. Yeah. Yeah, I think you need both. It's a combination of people, culture, technology. I think it's always going to be a combination of people, culture, technology, and finding the right tools for the right job. An example of this is my brother's an illustrator in LA, and he was in a class recently where he was, I think it was a class of 15. The teacher's camera was on, his camera was on, one other student's camera was on, and then there were 12 people with the camera off. And so he felt like he wasn't participating in a class. He was essentially a spectator in his own class. And I think this was an example of the tool's been implemented, but there hasn't been a culture change in at least that classroom that's caught up with the tool, or there's not a culture tool fit there. So I think one of the biggest things that we can do when we're looking at implementing tools to work remotely, collaborate remotely, is to think about how we change the culture slowly, steadily in tandem with that. One of the things I've seen be really successful is communication rules of engagement. So for example, executives, leaders, essentially always having their cameras on during meetings, or even implementing a rule that camera must be on during a meeting unless you need to step away and get a drink of water or something like that. And these particular rules, once they have an effect on an organization, can dramatically accelerate how effective these tools are. So it's important to have both at the same time, or you'll have all these tools, but you won't be able to use them.
Sure. So Daphne, first of all, thank you very much for the question. It's spot on. The tools are secondary. Tools are there to support. We can all do our jobs without them. We can do the jobs with bad tools, a different set of tools. It's the people and the culture that never change, and then the underlining architecture, whatever tools you choose, can just support that without the cultural change. So something more specific would be things like a shift in the way we manage, monitor, reward, recognize the work that people are doing. That is one of the biggest cultural changes that's having to take place, is as we are not physically seeing each other every day. Trust that people are doing their jobs, trust that people are doing their work, trust that people are being productive. And it's not just top down, it's also bottom up. Trust from employees that their executive leadership team are adjusting and taking the company in the right direction. So I think trust bidirectionally is probably one of the biggest cultural challenges that people have to have right now. Redefining the rules of what is acceptable, what is a proper outcome for a situation today may be different than what the proper outcome was for a situation 2 months ago. And this is where we talk about that flexibility. If you were supposed to produce X, Y, and Z 2 months ago, now maybe your production levels are going to be different, whether that's creating content, whether it's an artist creating something, whether it's a doctor remotely having to do patient interviews now and can't get as many done as they would have in an office. All of those measurements are things that I think we need to adjust. And it's those cultural changes of how we recognize and reward and have faith in that people are dedicated in doing their jobs, that will make a huge impact. And again, that's for all of us to do together, top down as well as bottom up. I hope that helps a little bit. It's culture definitely, I hope, is what you walk away with from today.
Yeah, great. Definitely a great question. I mean, that kind of combined with the next two questions that I was going to ask around the intersection of the human aspects as well as tech coming into the future of work. And then I do want to jump over to more questions. So if anyone has them, please continue to roll through and Brian will jump out. So I love that you mentioned trust and why that is such an important component into where what a lot of organizations and teams are going through right now, but then also what comes next? What is the 2.0 from here? So before we sort of dive back into the tech and then the human components of the future of work and how they sync up together, I would love to hear both of your insights around that, just taking that trust component of both top down and bottom up, and really trusting that things are getting done, even though the KPIs might not be the same as before, but the outcomes are being there. Something that is really interesting is, I'd love to hear your insights around what looks like an organization that is reacting to this and trying to just you know, figure out a way of, okay, this is how we have to quickly adapt and evolve to this. But then how other organizations might be saying, okay, we have to look at what we have to prepare for anything that comes this way again in the future, and maybe readjust a lot of the operations that we have to be able to work virtually. So just to sort of wrap up the question, I'm saying that some organizations are just trying to deal with the immediate, what is happening right now, and only sort of focusing on getting through this, whereas some other organizations I feel are going through a complete reshuffle and reshift into the future of what we're coming into. So I'd love your thoughts around that.
Sure, I think, you know, again, there's going to be a technology answer and there's going to be a cultural answer. I think that adjustment of expectations of short-term versus long-term, I think we're seeing successful companies right now putting their customers first and realizing that their role right now is more about their stakeholders, more about their employees and their customers than it is about, say, their stock price or something like that. I think we are seeing companies understand that if they're doing these things right, while there may be a short-term ramp up to get past these hurdles, in the long term, their companies are going to come out stronger in the end. And again, I think a lot of that is focusing your employees and your resources on doing what's right for your customers. And that's something that's been a wake-up call for a lot of organizations that may have had, you know, red tape or processes in the way, or people that were just internally focused that are now saying, ooh, maybe let's, I used the word listen earlier in the call. I think organizations that are being trained to listen right now are ones that are going to come out stronger in the long term. I think that's what you're looking for. What are we going to be doing to ensure our resilience and our ability to come back from this if it were to happen again?
Yeah, and just being in the mindset of both top down, bottom up, everyone in the organization of, okay, what is going on here? Are we reacting to working remotely and we're trying to just immediately change to go from in-person to remotely? Or do we need to be in a mindset of how our organization needs to change a lot of the internals and indefinitely, because there is a big shift right now. Yeah, definitely.
I think that idea of resiliency is something that's new to a lot of organizations. How do you stay calm through a challenge, but yet still react quickly? We don't have the time to get every answer right and have every process and every, you know, cross every T and dot every I. Right now we have to react, but we have to react in a way that is not harmful to either our customers or our own organizations. And it's an exercise that a lot of organizations are going through. How do you remain calm through crisis, and how do you, but yet still react quickly? And I think that's what you're going to see leading companies do.
Yeah, thank you. Gregory, do you have any insights from maybe how Zoom is handling this, whether through the reactory point or looking more towards, I guess, servicing the needs of a lot of organizations that are going through this?
Very much so. I mean, I think it does, to Alan's point, I think it focuses organizations on what's critically important. I think it focuses organizations on what's critically important to them, and then in a larger sense, what's critically important to the communities they serve. And that's certainly been the case with us, because we're fortunate that we can provide a tool that helps people remain productive and shift into this new landscape, which we hope is going to be temporary. And then in terms of what comes next, it's hard to say. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to predict the future successfully. I've tried, and every time I come up short, or at least it's a 50-50. I do think that this is going to force organizations to look at what's important now, but then to become, I think, more effective, more efficient, more lean, thinking about more of a focus on their customer and the people they serve in the longer term. I hope that lasts, because the organizations that have done it well today, you see a great deal of community giving and a great deal of really trying to help people through this difficult time. And it's very admirable, and I think it's the right thing to do. So I'm hoping that that spirit continues well past that this event.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a couple of questions. I'm just going to condense some of them. There's a few questions coming up around motivation of employees when they do get back to work. So maybe you could both sort of speak on what that looks like from an individual standpoint, or if you lead teams, and how we might need to play on these strings of motivation when people are used to working from home and not having to go back to the normal situation. So shifting between the virtual and then the in-person experience, how are we going to navigate that?
So we've had challenges of getting people from the office to home, and I think the question is now, when we're back to normal, what will the challenges be of getting people from home back to the office? And I think it's a fantastic question that organizations should start thinking about now, even though they may still just be adjusting to the change. They do need to understand that whether it's 6 weeks from now or 6 months from now, hopefully things will go back to a sense of normality. And I think it's the same, it's the reverse of the situation we're in now, where instead of taking the processes that you had and exactly shifting them over, once we get these new processes from working from home, it's not going to be a matter of just shifting them back. It's going to be finding the right balance. If you're completely a physical office and then have shifted to completely a virtual office, well, maybe you're not going to shift back to completely being a physical office. Maybe you're going to shift to 50-50, or 3 days a week in the office and 2 days at home. Maybe you've learned the lessons from this of what work. Or maybe your employees are saying, you know, we don't want to be at home. We've done this. The last thing I want to see is my living room again. I need to come spend my time in the office. Again, it's going to come back to that flexibility. And it's not just ourselves and our colleagues that have to adjust to this. It is our families and our friends. And, you know, especially those that have, you know, children at home and, you know, have now gotten used to having mom and dad at home. What is it going to be like when we do shift back to that? So I think employers have learned that their organizations, the people they represent, their employees are humans. I think, you know, Greg, you said so many companies are reaching out and are doing good things. If something extremely positive comes from this whole situation, is that hopefully we are finding that we are humans and we are more than just the serial number on our badge. And I think that is going to influence a lot of the future of work.
I would love to then move right into my next final question, which I've been waiting to ask, unless, Greg, you had anything else to add there. It definitely is to play on.
Greg, you go first next. Sorry.
Sure, no problem. The only thing I'll add is I think this is forcing organizations to take a step back and ask the question, does this really need to all be done on site, or can we have a hybrid that enables employees to live, work the way that they want to live? And so I think that coming out of that question isn't going to go anywhere. If anything, it's been amplified significantly. So I do think that we're going to see change. And I think to Alan's point, it's really important to start thinking about that now.
Yeah, definitely. So when we do consider the future of work, I mean, I'm just going to speak from my own perspective here, but there's been a lot of fear around automation technology, the role that robotic process automation will play in streamlining a lot of operations in the workplace. And there's been, in my eyes, working in innovation in the tech industry, a lot of fear around what's that going to mean for my job? How am I still going to be needed? Do I need to upskill myself to adapt to being more technologically savvy? So I'd love to hear both of your perspectives around the two roles of the human components and the tech components in the workplace. And you can kind of go with this. You're both brilliant when it comes to this topic. So to kind of take what I'm saying as however you wanted to answer it, but just focusing on the evolution of the future of work until now and the way that we are being forced into this paradigm shift into really possibly not being afraid of technology, but being really aware that it's here and we have to collaborate or figure out some way to work together with machines and robotics in the workplace, because right now that's what we're forced to do. We're all working remotely from our laptops, and we wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have technology advances to enable that and the tools that we have these days. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around the collaboration between the human component and then the tech component, and what that might look for the mindset in a lot of people that have been afraid in where the next paradigm shift we're going into.
Mm-hmm. Alexa, answer Faye's question. See, we're not quite there yet.
Alan, watch out with that. You just set off the Alexa in my room.
Amazing.
I didn't order a product, at least. Let's see how it goes. So we are absolutely, even prior to this current situation, employees are having to figure out the balance between where technology and automation and artificial intelligence and all of these things play in the role of their future job. Being at home and having a little bit, hopefully more time to ourselves to be mindful and understanding and educate ourselves and maybe learn a new skill during this time frame is giving us the ability to innovate in ways we may not have been able to when we were in the pre-COVID situation where we were just busy and had our processes. Hopefully people are using this time to think creatively. And that is one of the things that all of this automation is not going to allow us to do. Automation is an incredible enhancement to our abilities to get our jobs done. It can bring us contextual information that we manually would have suffered to get. If you're a doctor or a lawyer and you can't read 1,000 trade journals, but automation can bring the right information to you. Or scheduling a meeting, how do we go back and forth with what time is the right time for a meeting? Simple little things like that we automate. Automation is about augmenting, not replacing our jobs. And it's easy to say in a knowledge worker environment. It's very different than, say, a robotics or a factory type environment. But today we're talking about knowledge worker type of worlds. Mm-hmm. And I think moving forward, this has taught us how important the humanity aspect of things are. We've left the office, we're missing our colleagues, we're home with our family. Every aspect of what's going on right now, stay at home, shelter in place, be safe, has brought us back to human connection. And we are going to learn from this how we are going to work together with automation. And I think we're going to be stronger for it coming out the end.
Right, yeah. I love automating my emails. That's one thing.
Me too. I completely agree with that. I think it's not just about augmenting work, but it opens up capacity to find new value. And so every time that I've automated a process, I find that, now there's more that I can focus on and look at automating or look at doing better. And I think when it comes to artificial intelligence, really, I think what we're often talking about is machine learning. We're talking about automation, not necessarily replicating the human brain. So it's a bit of a false metaphor. And I think what we're doing today in that space of machine learning is we're replicating rational processes. We're not replicating the irrational, and people are fundamentally irrational. You can't replace that irrationality for better and worse, and you can't replace human connection. So I think in terms of what the future of work looks like in that area, it's not going to detract from the future of work. It's really going to add to it, but it's going to force people to be flexible And I think in a lot of cases, not necessarily in the knowledge economy, but in the service economy or production lines, it's going to put people in a situation where they're going to need to retrain rapidly and repeatedly. So having structures in place at a government level or some other social level to help them get there and help them keep current is going to be key. But I think,
let me,
yeah, please.
Sorry, you finished, I apologize.
Oh, no, I was about to finish, so please jump in.
Let's just say a very tangible example that you've reminded me of, given the industry you work in, is things like automatic transcription of unified communications and web conferencing. If we're all on all these web conferences now, we're having to pay attention and our cameras are on and we're trying to socialize and be human, then we're also not note taking. So it's wonderful that we now have automated assistants to actually do transcription of our meeting minutes and do things like flag keywords. And when I say follow-up, create a task to do follow-ups. Every time a company's name is mentioned, link to their CRM record, all of these types of things that automation is doing to truly work together with us, not to replace us, but to enhance the way we do our job. So whether it's Google Photos automatically indexing my images, or whether it's Gmail auto replying as I start typing, like so many parts of my day have been enhanced by automation.
Yeah, and one thing I completely agree with you both there on that. And one thing I'm really interested to see is how people engage with technology when we go, mostly on their devices, when we go back to being able to socialize and connect physically in person. It's completely apparent how uncomfortable people
I had a friend. Yeah, I had a friend tell me they're using voice dictation now more at home because they didn't when they were in the office, because they didn't want to be sitting at their desk talking to their phone. So now they're at home in their bedroom or their office at home or whatever, and they're voice dictating a lot more than they did when they were at the office. So it might be funny when we all go back. We all may be sitting next to each other, but maybe we'll all be talking to our devices. We'll see.
Just on WhatsApp, sending voice notes. I mean, and also just in society, how people are so inherently uncomfortable with stillness. You see anyone on the subway in New York City and everyone's on their phones. Any moment that people have to be just by themselves, they're on their devices. So it will be really interesting to see how if people do shift back to being a little bit more connected in the in-person experience after being in the virtual collaboration world for such a long time now. Thank you both so much. We're right on 10:30. If you have a couple of minutes, I would just love to ask out to the audience or to Brian if you have any other questions. I know Brian is the biggest fan when it comes to future of work. So Brian, do you have any questions for Alan and Greg?
Yeah, and I'm going to be terrible, and I'm going to put my personal question ahead of questions that we have from the audience right now, because I'm inspired by
the benefits of being the CEO.
Yeah, Alan's inspired me about being focused on our customers. So one thing that hasn't touched. So there were two questions that came through. One of them we touched on, which is how to get employees back to the workplace after crisis. The other actually, I think, is one that even I can answer. It was about whether people can perform at a high level remotely, and I think there's some people I think that I'm sure you all have a take on that. I think that remote work has already shown that the answer to that is yes. So I worked in financial services and equity research before I got into tech and venture. I mean, I started when I was really young in tech, and then got lost in the finance world and found my way back, thank God. But the last job I had outside of tech was for an equity research firm that, instead of hiring typical, sort of like MBA analysts for doing research, they hired reporters who basically do the same work, which is you build a Rolodex of contacts, and then you work those contacts in order to find insights. You pull those insights together and use them to write research about trends that are happening in an industry. And reporters are generally on the ground. And so it was like 90% remote workers. It's hard to write about Monsanto seed company if you're not somewhere in middle America where the farmers are actually using the seeds. And I think also something that I've learned is that people just have different work styles. And so what works for some people doesn't work for others. And I think as a leader, recognizing that and not trying to, I think a lot of people try to project what works for me, this is best, and they try to push it, as opposed to identifying that different things work better for different people. And I think the opportunity to to work from home, the opportunity to not have to deal with a commute, works better for a lot of people. You know, this space is more comfortable work environment for many people than is an office. The question I had is getting back to like just being a total tech geek. Is I'm curious. We are both Salesforce and Zoom users. And so I can say, you know, when it comes to the massive tool set that we have, whether it's things that we work on that are helping with automation, Faye and I recently got signed up with Superhuman to help manage the raging dumpster fire that is my email inbox. You know, we use Calendly for scheduling. We use a lot of different tools. We use a lot of like sort of Zapier for actually integrating things between Salesforce and Slack and a lot of other tools that we have. I'm curious if you guys have any tools that you use that help with collaboration or with remote work that you're big fans of that you'd like to share. And I started by saying I'm users of Zoom and Salesforce because I think that's the first and most obvious. And maybe if you could share a couple, and then maybe if I think a lot of people, especially now, are so much more familiar with Zoom, but maybe there's a feature on Zoom that is maybe less well known. That's been great, and the same thing for you, Alan, with Salesforce. So it's a couple questions.
Yeah, Alan, do you mind if I lead that one?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I think, well, first, we're big Salesforce users, so so always great to have someone from Salesforce. I think for us, it's really about finding the right tool for the right job, with the caveat that sometimes you don't know what the right job is yet because you haven't found the right tool. So it's a bit of a cat and mouse game. I will say though, I mean, to the core of the question, it is absolutely possible to be a highly effective organization or be highly effective at what you do while being completely remote. I actually think, I mean, I know we hit on this point earlier, it has more to do with trust within the organization. It has more to do with finding your daily fit than it does with the tool set. Some tools that, I mean, we use on a daily basis, we use Zoom, we use Salesforce. I love Calendly, it's great. And some of the features within Zoom that I use are live transcripts. I almost never take notes anymore, and it's nice because I can pay full attention during a meeting and then go back afterwards and search for what I need. So I think it's going to vary depending on what you're doing and where you are. I know it's not a great concrete answer, but
are there any other tools other than the ones that we've mentioned that you use that maybe people aren't super familiar with?
Maybe your top go-tos couldn't live without, like the top two that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I really use the core tools I mentioned. I don't really use many more tools beyond that. Actually, a tool that I really like for my inbox is Mixmax because of the email automations that exist within it, tracking, opens, that sort of thing. So I can see when I'm getting engagement on an email. So that's something I use on a daily basis that I find extremely helpful.
Sometimes as well, I just quickly want to jump in there before I let Alan let us know his answers, but sometimes pen and paper can be the best tool. Brian also does have this tendency to just want to know about every new feature to automate everything, which I love as well. But sometimes simplicity really of just, here's my to-do list and I'm going to do it because it's pen and paper and it's in my hand, in my pocket.
Right.
Yes, Brian. Sometimes that can be the best. And, you know, I feel like we do have endless information about new tools and new processes to sync up, but sometimes it can get a little bit overwhelming as well.
Yeah.
All right, I'll give you two quick examples, and then I do have to drop in just a moment here. But instead of saying a specific product name, I'll give you product categories. Two things that I think can be really helpful for people. We'll start with the easier one, a screen capture tool. If we're all working at home now, I probably share 50 screenshots a day. I don't know whether it's screenshots of this webinar and then posting it into Twitter, which I've seen some people doing, or whether I have to now visually communicate something with a colleague that I would have drawn on a whiteboard in front of them. I screenshot everything. So, you know, whether you're Windows or Mac or on a mobile device, investigate what some of the screen capture tools are. Ping me privately if you want, you know, the advice on which ones I use.
But I think you can't publicly endorse anybody.
I don't know.
I'll throw one out there. I think that's a great point. I use Skitch which is a product that was bought by Evernote. And if you have an Evernote account, it saves everyone. It also works well on mobile. I think I agree with you completely. To build on that, there are screen record tools that are great too. And I use those because I've spent a lot of time as like a product manager. So like looking at web products and needing to give feedback to people, whether it's on a web tool or it's on a website, and being able to sort of annotate. One that we use is a Chrome extension. It's called Screencastify, which is awesome because you literally just click a button in Chrome and it starts recording your screen or your tab, and then immediately uploads it to your Google Drive and creates a shareable link. So like in 2 clicks, I can share feedback. I can share a video of anyway.
Okay.
Those are 2 that I like.
I totally agree. And Windows and Mac both have a built-in version, but I think once you get past their basic limitations, you'll all probably want one of the tools that we're mentioning. And then the second one, the fun one, I'm going to say that is super important to me is a Steadicam. You don't have to buy a $10,000 expensive one. You can spend $200 and get whichever brand one you want. But I record a lot of video, and the ability to just quickly, whether it's in my backyard or in front of a professional backdrop, just have like a nice steady video makes a huge difference. And that's kind of my more geeky answer to you. If you like gadgets and devices, I've got a smaller one here. I've got a 360-degree camera that's with me at all times. I like 360-degree photography, but
that's the ultimate content setup.
But my advice to everybody would be a very simple Steadicam, because it'll make your videos, whether it's on Instagram or your corporate intranet, I don't care which, I think it'll make your videos look a lot more professional.
Yeah, content is definitely king right now.
Love that. There's one that we use actually. I have one. So there's someone on our team who, when there is a video that is pulled from this, which we'll obviously share with you before we push out to the interwebs, to pull some certain insights out. We have a head of content who's a filmmaker, unbelievably talented, and so I ended up getting one of these sort of gimbals, and there's one that we use from a company called Movi that we've been super happy with. But yeah, couldn't agree more with both of those.
Okay, well, thank you so much, gentlemen. We're going to wrap it up there. Thank you to the audience for joining us this morning for your questions.
Virtual
I hope
golf.
you all enjoyed. I hope everyone has a beautiful day working in your virtual spaces. Take care.
Well, listen, yeah, I'll share that too. Thank you so much, Greg and Alan. This was really great and insightful and super fun. We have, for you and for everyone else that's still on, we actually have 9 companies that are innovating in the future of work and remote work and collaboration space that are pitching at a virtual demo day tomorrow at 9 a.m. So we'll share those details with you. Everyone that is signed up for this is going to be getting them for sure if they haven't gotten them already. But thank you so much. This is a really compelling conversation. Thank you to Charles as well. I think I've got the slides here, who gave some really good insights. If you haven't checked out Klaxoon, I highly recommend you go and check the tool out. They're used by, I think now 10% of the Fortune 500. So a pretty solid endorsement. I would definitely check it out. Same thing with Zoom and Salesforce. If you're not using it, obviously, shameless plugs. Thank you to Mara for joining and talking about McCarter English and their amazing venture tech practice. We work with CSG when it comes to immigration. Clarity is our awesome PR firm, and Rent24 is the space that we wish we could be in, but is currently on lockdown in Midtown Manhattan. Thanks to everyone that joined and for the great questions that came through. And Alan, Greg, I'm sure you both got to go. Really appreciate it. Look forward to following up. Have an awesome day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.